And we are live. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Soft Power TV. It's Dr. Kiki and Nathan here sharing our first official sound song story stream on Soft Power TV. So just before we hit the go live button, we are already starting to get into some juicy conversation, and we just had to pause right where we were so that we could invite you all into our conversation and be with us today. So thank you to those of you who are tuning in and joining us today. And we look forward to connecting with you throughout the call. So feel free to share any comments, any reactions in the comment box, and we will definitely be engaging with that as well. So before we jump back to that conversation we just started, Nathan, I just want to give us both a chance to kind of say and check in with one another. You know, where are we at today? Are there any celebrations? Is there any moments of gratitude that you want to bring into this space to kind of open us up?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thank you, Kiki. Pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone. Great to be back on Soft Power TV. I've been in a place of deep reflection as of late, and I've kind of been in a place of research, a place of challenging things that I've learned, but also things that I've unlearned and learned again, and just continuing. Siobhan has talked about this. I think she talked about this on the past call with Q, which was just so amazing, the three of you together. I remember Siobhan talking about just constantly being open to change and constantly being embracing it, being willing to let down your guard and being willing to let yourself be guided by spirit, be guided by ancestors, be guided by your inner divinity and the connection with the outer divinity as well. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for, I say this almost every time I talk about things that I'm grateful for, but I'm just super grateful for technology, frankly, and the things that the accessibility to knowledge that we have. This morning, I spent a considerable amount of time just ferociously typing and going down different rabbit holes and looking at things that have recently come into my mind that I'm just curious about and exploring. So I'm really in a place of gratitude for the opportunity to continue to learn and continue to unlearn. I'm also grateful for you and grateful for Soft Power and for my sisters in Soft Power. Y'all have really pushed me and challenged me in ways that I've been wanting to be challenged for a while, but I haven't necessarily put myself in a space or in a community that's pushed me to do so in the ways that y'all have, both directly and frankly quite indirectly. I feel challenged in the best way when I'm in y'all's presence, and then just being in community with you. So I'm grateful for you and grateful for Soft Power and everyone in it and the board, and just that's the place that I'm at right now. So I'm grateful for all of those things. How about you, Kiki?
Just want to reflect that back to you. So grateful for you. I'm sure this will come up a lot, but for those of you who are new, perhaps to the stream, to Soft Power TV, to the Soft Power community, Nathan and I go back quite a few years. And so I'm just grateful that we are on this journey together, and that we continue to be in community with one another in witnessing the change and allowing each other to evolve. So much love to you. Today, most recently, I've been really grateful for the presence of my ancestors in my life. I am in a deep season of change around my mediumship gifts and the depth in which spirit and my ancestors are connecting with me these days. And so with that comes a lot of gratitude, because there were so many years where I felt disconnected and also forgotten adoptee. Or that was my fear, was that I was forgotten by my ancestors.
Mm,
And so I'm really grateful to be in relationship spiritually with my ancestors and with the guides that have been really present for me recently. And with that, again, comes more responsibility and more integrity from me to really like stick to certain practices and disciplines that keep me moving in this world and showing up for other people and not getting drowned in the expansiveness of it all.
ooh,
And so yeah, I think that's really what I'm grateful for, is just like this season of change and really maturity, I think, for myself, of like not getting super caught up in some of the bullshit that I used to allow myself to wade in and uh get stuck in. And so it's really, staying, especially with the practices that we've been sharing through Soft Power Choir,
mm,
really being diligent about, this is a daily practice for me to take care of my spiritual hygiene, for me to be in a space where I'm constantly checking in with my nervous system and my emotional state and my mental state and my physical state, to say, like, what does my body need at this moment, so that I can really show up for myself and mother myself first, so that I can really be the best mother I can be for my daughter, and to show up for my family members the way that I want to and desire to. So
mm.
that's where I'm at today.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Hmm.
Kiki, would you
So yeah, go.
Kiki, would you mind, as much as you're comfortable sharing, I would love to hear more about the new depths and discoveries in your mediumship and in your
Yeah,
journey. Because we texted about it briefly, but we haven't had a chance to talk about it. And
yeah,
anyway,
let's get into it.
yeah, I'm,
I'm totally open to talk about it. And I think, again, this is another call. I wasn't necessarily planning on bringing that up, but just because we started off with gratitude, it just kind of lent itself to the story. And so I had a reading in 2021, early 2021, with a really good friend, psychic medium, who like straight up said, like, yes, you do have mediumship abilities. So it was just kind of like a confirmation that these abilities are here. It's really up to me if I want to like tap into that or not. But I want to take it back to when I was a really young kid. There's stories of me being around like another like young baby. I think I was maybe like 3 or 4 in this story. And I was around maybe like a 10-month-old baby. And my mom was visiting with her friend who was the mother of this child, this baby. And they overheard me lean close into this baby and say, "Can you remind me of what heaven's like? I'm beginning to forget."
mm,
And so just to kind of start off, that there was just kind of this baseline understanding and connection that like we come from a spirit realm and we return to a spirit realm.
yeah,
And so that's always been part of me. That's not something that, even though, yes, I grew up in the church and my mom was, is a pastor, and like spirit is there, but she really didn't like hammer it into me. It really wasn't like that. So growing up, being very spiritual. And then when my grandma passed away when I was 4 years old, I would tell my mom that I could see my grandma and talk to my grandma in my diamond necklace. So I had a necklace that my uncles had given me for Christmas one year. And basically, I understand that now as scrying, and being able to look into my diamond, my crystal ball, whatever you want to call it, and to literally speak to spirit. And so my grandma has been just like a really strong presence for me since I was very little. So she's been with me throughout my entire life since she passed in that way. And it was confirmed by that medium in 2021 that she is my mediumship guide. And so once that kind of was placed in front of me, and I was like, okay, what do I want to do with this? You know, is this something I really want to lean into? And I've always desired a deeper connection to spirit in that way. I've always, my first psychic reading was when I was in fifth or sixth grade. And so, you know, I've just always been super open to, you know, a lot of different perspectives and ways of accessing knowledge through the spiritual realm and spiritual guides. So, you know, now most recently, it just is feeling like just a much stronger, clearer energy when I do call in these ancestors. And most recently, it was like I felt my entire energy shift, and it was just like a clear voice in my ear that was telling me messages and sharing with me. When I was, you know, asking specific questions, I would get a response. I was also working with tarot cards at the time, and I was working with my pendulum. So that was like supporting me through it. But, you know, I'm like really just kind of walking this path totally by myself right now. I haven't worked with any sort of mentor or guide to like really tell me, you know, like this is what you should do or shouldn't do. But ultimately just trying to like care for my, like I said, the spiritual hygiene of like really grounding myself before I connect or call in these types of guides and energies, and doing my best to then, you know, to close the containers when I'm done. But I will say the most recent one was, I think about, yeah, it was like last Sunday, I think, when it happened. And I just had like a total like channeling hangover for the rest of the day, because it was just a lot of energy that had just flowed through me. And so that just having that experience that was so, I don't want to say exhausting, but just like really was a little taxing, was just a huge like eye opener to me that, yeah, okay, like I need to really take this seriously and move forward cautiously. I don't know if is the right word, but you know, just being in respect of this ability and, you know, where it could lead me. So that's kind of where I'm.
Amazing. Amazing. First off, congratulations. If I think it's appropriate to say congratulations on this next step, you know, in your journey, in your medium journey. And it huh, I think I'd like to bring it back to one of the core pillars of soft power, and one of the things that we really embrace, and that we practice, and that we discuss is decolonized practices. And I think just even the concept, especially from, if there are any people who may not be in soft power but may just be observing, like kind of coming through type of thing, I think it's really important for people, especially people who are newer on their decolonization journey, or people who may have been conditioned by Western ways of thinking about magic and thinking about ritual, in the ways that those are embedded in media, in the ways in which those messages are twisted and those concepts are twisted. I think it's super, super important, um, to hear you share what you just shared. You know, so thank you, and congratulations on this next step in your journey. It's incredible to witness.
Thank you for asking. Gotta take a breath. You know, this
Kiki, it might be me, but your volume just got really low.
Working on it. I'm trying to turn myself down over here. I don't know if that's helping at all. Maybe I just need to turn down the volume on my computer. I'm
Am I
feeling
really loud?
feedback too. Is that any better?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Okay, cool. And you can still hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you better than before.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think both of us have gone through such incredible transitions of um I will say, in 2018, my main identifier and label that I used for myself was choral conductor. And now to bring this spiritual side of me into being, part of the whole picture of who I am, has really shifted that. And so now my title that I use for myself is voice alchemist. But I would really love for you to share a little bit about your transition too in the last few years of decolonization work and unlearning and healing of where you were and where you find yourself now. And we have a general idea of where we want this conversation to go, but just again allowing space for you to be seen in your wholeness.
I, ever since I was a kid, I've always been really, really observant of things. And I think there are a number of reasons for that. I think one of those reasons is because a little bit of background behind me. Kiki, you're familiar with the story, but for those of you who are watching who might not be, um, my biological mom has always been in my life, but my biological dad has not been. And I'm mixed. My mom has German ancestry, and my biological dad has Mexican ancestry. And he wasn't really in my life. They were never married. They were together, but they were never married. And then they split up very early in my life. And my mom was the one that I lived with, and she's the one who raised me. And my dad had visits. You know, he would come see me every other weekend. And we'd meet on a Saturday. We'd go to like a restaurant, a Mexican restaurant, and we would have. I remember I would always eat a. I loved the dinosaur shaped chicken nuggets. So of all the things that I got, I loved those chicken nuggets. The restaurant was called Diamond Dave's. I remember we went there
Oh,
every Saturday, and I would either get a Shirley Temp like a virgin drink.
uh-huh.
Uh, he never has been much of a drinker, so he would just have soda. Um, but anyway, we would meet. I think it was every other Saturday, and those visits started to happen less frequently and less frequently and less frequently. There would be times when he just wouldn't show up, and so that kind of started the process of me reconciling
Mm.
with all of that. Um, but interestingly, you know, everyone has their own journey and everyone has their own story, and no two people are alike. And I think that's one of the frankly, I think that's one of the beauties of this life that we live, and the incarnations that we have, is that no two people are the same, and we are all embodiment of spirit, right? And I think Q was talk. I think one of y'all were talking about this on Wednesday. I just want to say one more time. I loved the call. Just so much yes on that. Y'all are so brilliant. Um, but one of the things that was discussed is that we are all various images of spirit and of collective consciousness, if that's what one would want to call it. And we all have our own quirks and characteristics that are a part of who we are, but also a part of our ancestry, um, and a part of our environment that we grow up in. And one could say the stories that our souls choose, potentially, with this lifetime, um, both positives and negatives, if one wants to even look at it like that. Um, all of that to say, I even though my biological dad left the picture fairly early on, um, I was really blessed to have a father figure. My mom met my stepdad, who is now my adoptive dad, Dan, very early on. Um, frankly, right around the same time that my mom split from my biological dad, and they ended up being together and they got married. I was in their wedding. I was the master of ceremonies. I had a little tux.
Aw.
I uh, I I I danced with my mom at her wedding. Uh, that was,
Mhm.
that's a beautiful memory, and I've seen so many pictures. I don't remember a whole lot, but anyway, my adopted dad, Dan, he's always been in my life, so I've been blessed to have a father figure. And I've recently been reconnecting with my biological dad over the past couple of years. It's been a a slow process, but there is progress being made, and I will say that the speed at which it's happening is entirely my decision. Um, and he's been very open about accepting that and letting me know the patience with which he's holding in this experience. So, and that's a whole nother story that we can get into some other time. But but anyway, I was always a very observant child, and I've always been an extremely observant person. Um, and I think part of that has to do with the the origins of my fatherly experience, both with my biological dad and my adoptive dad. Um, my adoptive dad, he has provided for me and been there for me, and loved me and cared for me in the ways that he can. Just like we all do. We all have our we all are who we are. And
Mhm.
I think I was always I was always very observant and always seeking knowledge because I was always seeking answers because I think growing up I had a lot of questions because of the situation in my life, and I was always seeking knowledge, um, to try to get answers, to try to learn things about my life, but also learn about why my life was the way that it was. I think that's one of the big questions that I've always been searching. And growing up, I I was I was raised in a small town of, Kiki. We've talked about this so many times, and you can relate. I was raised as a mixed kid who was raised in an all white town by white parents, raised with all white culture, white rural Midwestern culture. But and I say white, I don't say German, because I think that is one of the aspects of whiteness and the colonial project of whiteness is the
The
elimination.
rejection of ancestry.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I was always really confused. There was always a sense of identity crisis, I guess you could say. Um, and I've always been I was a people pleaser for a very, very, very long time, and I'm a recovering people pleaser. Um, and I think that manifested, especially when I was young, in the ways that I just did everything that I could to try to fit in with where I was at. I pretended to be. I hung out with the farm kids in the machine sheds, even though I that was not my. I live in Los Angeles. I live in like that's I don't drive combines. Like that's not what I do.
Did you have drive your tractor to school day?
Yes. It was during
Yeah,
home.
so did we. Oh my gosh. Did anyone else here? If you did, if you ever experienced drive your tractor to school day, please put it in the comments. It was always you drive up to school and literally just these huge John Deeres
Yeah.
taking up the entire parking lot.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Was it during homecoming week?
Probably.
Okay. Ours
Probably
was
now that you mention it. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was like a spring. I feel like it was in the spring semester for some reason. Like, I don't know. There was some other maybe FFA event, FFA week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's probably what it was.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. Drive a tractor to school day. What a time. So all of that to say, growing up and throughout high school, especially being raised where I was and being the person that I am with the ancestry that I have, there was always just a lot of confusion. And one of the things, ever since I was young, and I before I get ahead of myself, ever since I was young, I always found myself having deep empathy for people who were being bullied or for people who were not being treated right in some way, shape, or form. I was always the kid. I was the kid on the bus on the way to the field trip. If there was a kid getting bullied by someone, I would go over and be like, "Hey, stop this." But interestingly, I was a really like I was non-confrontational, but I was like, I had to work up so much courage to do it, but I did it. I did it anyway because I'm like, no, I feel very passionate about this, and it's not right that this is happening. So I've always been like that. And when I went to college, I started learning more, especially considering I grew up in a town of 3,000 white people, 3,000 most 90%, 95% white people. When I went to college, that's when I started to experience the culture outside of the bubble in which I grew up, in so many ways. And that's when I started learning about other cultures and other people and other people's experiences. And then my level of empathy that I already had just started to deepen and broaden and expand. And all of that to say, I've always been one who's been reflective of the ways in which I can look at myself and try to observe things that I embody, both good and bad, I guess you could say. And that has just continued. That's just continued to expand. So during my undergrad, a big thing for me was singing and now we can start to connect it to music, which is beautiful. There was a big moment more the choir. I went to Wartburg College in Waverly, Iowa. I had an amazing experience there, and I sang in the choir for 4 years. Dr. Nelson is the conductor there. I believe you know Dr. Nelson. You met Dr. Nelson.
Good old Lutheran college choir school.
Yes, exactly. And sophomore year, we sang at a ACDA. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's an American Choral Directors Association. It's like the big organization for choral directors around. Yeah, exactly. So we sang at one of their conferences, and we sang an oratorio called "To Be Certain of the Dawn" by Stephen Paulus, and text by Michael Dennis Brown, and it's about the Holocaust. And because it was a big performance and it happened in the spring, Dr. Nelson really worked us, and he wanted to make sure that that we represented ourselves the best that we could, and obviously that's a big moment for him in his career. So he to wanted all of us to do our best. Um, so not only did we spend a lot of time learning that music and focusing on the music, but one of the things that I really, really loved and that was tremendously impactful for me with my choral experience during my undergrad degree and is that Dr. Nelson always almost frankly more so than any other choral director that I've personally like been in the room with, he has a really really great gift for taking time away from the work and the singing to talk about the text and to talk about the culture behind it and what's going on. And we spent so much time talking about that piece and talking about the history and talking about the Holocaust and what happened. And that was a really really big moment for me. I remember being in a trance state. I now describe it as that and understand it as that in the performance. I absolutely remember it, and that really was a catalyst for me starting my taking a next level of my unlearning journey. And fast forward when 2020 hit and everything that came with it, that was kind of a next level awakening for me. Um, I know a lot of other people our age that had awakenings early. For me, mine was a little later. Mine was in 2020. Um, I was aware of things, but that was really when things busted open for me,
Mhm. Mhm.
frankly. Um, and that's when I started thinking about on an even deeper level about white supremacy and capitalism and imperialism and and LGBTQ IA discrimination and oppression and just everything that we're talking about with soft power, you know.
Mhm.
And since then, I've been one of the it's been one of the biggest priorities of my life to reflect on these things and to commit to unlearning and commit to the healing because those things are painful to everyone in their own way. You know, patriarchy isn't something that just harms women or just harms femmes. Patriarchy is harmful for men. It's good for no one.
Mhm.
And it harms in different ways. So like for me, it's the psychological and emotional aspect of that internal reckoning of seeing the ways in which I have been conditioned by these things, the ways and the thoughts that pop in my head naturally that I now catch myself thinking and shed or
Mhm.
sit with, you know, and just sitting with all of those things. And the past 3 years have been, yeah, 3 years because we're in 2023,
Mhm.
3.5 years. They've been just more than I can really put to words. I'm a completely different person than I was back then, and I'm a different person than I was a month ago. I'm a different person than I was a week ago, and that's just the journey that I'm on.
Mhm.
And yeah, yeah, and you know, and one I guess kind of to wrap up this monologue that I've been given
No, I'm here for it. I love it.
to wrap to to, to wrap to wrap this up. I come from a place where a fair amount of people are born and raised and they stay in the same town and they raise a family and they maybe keep the same kind of job for a long time. And then and I'm not saying this to criticize that way of living. I'm not saying this to say that I'm better and they're not as good as me. I'm saying our paths are really different. And having been someone who came from a place like I just described and everything that comes with it, and then reflect it and being the person that I am now, it's it's been challenging. I'm not gonna lie. It's been challenging for me. Um,
Let's get into that. Let's get into the juiciness of the challenge. Okay. Because I know your story, I want to dive in a little bit deeper with you. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So as you've mentioned, 2020 was such a major year for so many people. Obviously, the global pandemic, there, just the real obvious events that opened so many people's eyes to racism and oppression in our country occurred. And I think that was a major turning point for me as well. And that was when I like really claimed decolonization as a journey that I wanted to go on for myself. Even though I had probably already started that path prior to then, that was really when I had the language for decolonization. So to return back to 2020 for both of us, I was in my second year of my doctorate at Arizona State University in choral conducting, and my minor, if you will, was in music education. And I had some really incredible teachers there that by the time I did graduate, my research was in decolonizing the choral classroom and music education, and from that kind of lens and perspective. So I was able to really integrate that. But for you in 2020, share a little bit more about where you were physically, and just again, even thinking about what your future was going to look like at that point when you found yourself in the middle of a global pandemic, living in LA, and all of that.
Mm. In 2020, I was in my last year of coursework for my DMA, for my Doctor of Musical Arts at USC, and I had gone straight through school. So I did my undergraduate degree at Wartburg, went straight into my master's degree at the University of Missouri. Most master's degree are 2 years, so I stayed an extra year, and that's where we met in that third year. And during that
When you
extra,
say it out loud, I'm just like, oh my gosh, so much school. So much school.
so much. Um, And so I stayed that third year, and that's when we met. And when during that third year for me, I was a TA with Dr. Crab. We were working together, and I was also working with Dilbashian. I was working
Yeah.
with the orchestra, and that's one of the main reasons and then the vocal ped. Remember our vocal ped?
We need to bring Megan on sometime.
um, but so I stayed that third year, and then I went to USC, 3 years of coursework at USC. So I was in college for 10 straight years, and I was in grad school for 6. I was a TA for 5, and like I was burned out. I was burned out. So when 2020 in my experience at USC it was so many things. My experience at Wartburg was super awesome and very fun. It was challenging, and I worked so hard, and I got so much better than in a number of things than I was when I started. Same thing at Mizzou. I loved my experience at Mizzou. It was incredible. USC, there were things that I loved, but that experience was there's beauty in it. And I think this is the first time that I'm actually describing it like this.
Mm-hmm.
There was more darkness in my experience with my doctorate than there was a different kind of darkness. And I think it was good. I'm grateful for it.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, I I've alchemized it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finished up with my last year of coursework, this was 2019, 2020, and then the
What are
pandemic.
some of the without, we don't have to share names or anything like that, any specific details, but like, what is the darkness that you're referring to? Because I think I'm on the same wavelength as you around that. Like what was revealed to you about what you were studying, what you were training to be, the relationships that you were creating with your professors at that time. Um, what did that reveal to you about your if you had stayed that course, where you would have ended up?
My experience at USC started with me coming in with my tail between my legs. At my audition process at USC, um, keep keep in mind I was a 25-year-old master's student applying for a doctorate program when there were people who were 10, 15 years older than me applying for the same program and in the same program. So I was in a very different stage of my life. And frankly, especially reflecting on it now, I was a child in a number of ways. Um, I've grown a lot since then. I'm still, I'm 32, so I'm on my journey, and I will continue to learn and continue to grow. But I have more wisdom now than I had back in those years, and I've done a considerable amount of unlearning and relearning and unlearning and relearning and healing since that time. And when I applied to USC, I chip on my shoulder. Um, I was I was really confident in my abilities, um, but also very defensive of my holes in my abilities that I had. And when I went to USC for the audition, I did the audition process. For those of you who don't know, the audition process for the programs that Kiki and I were in, they usually involve interviews. They involve us sitting in on classes, testing things out, trying things out. They interviews with the faculty. We have an audition. Usually requires sing in front of faculty, if not choral and vocal. We also have to conduct for a lab ensemble that they put together. There's a lot of things. We're tested about music history and oral skills. We're tested on a lot of things. And choral, being a choral conductor is a very niche thing. Um, and I think, but I say this in a really neat, fascinating way, because there are so many skills that are required, I think, to do what we do, Kiki, and to be trained in what we do. Because also it's not just music. This
Yeah.
core, as we know with soft power choir, it's community, it's people. Especially considering this is a really important thing, and I can say this especially because I've had opportunities working. I've spent time conducting orchestras, and I've worked with orchestras and rehearsed orchestras, and there's a big difference between the vibe and the aesthetic and the energy of a choral ensemble and an orchestra, because orchestras are usually made up of people who have had years and years and years of training with their instrument. They're usually very proficient in their instrument. In the professional world, they're usually with the union. So when it's time to start rehearsal, they're there. And the downbeat starts, they rehearse. When it's time up, they are out of there, because they're like, I'm just getting paid. It's their job, I'm getting paid to come here and play, and that's it. And
That's the culture of orchestras.
culture of orchestras, exactly. And the culture of choirs is very different, especially in so many ways. But they're one of the common threads, I think, and one of the biggest differences between most orchestras and most choirs is that orchestras are usually semi-professional and professional ensembles. And I say that because there's not as much opportunity or embracement or an embracing of taking time out to talk about the composer and to talk about the text. That's that, like there is in choir. And choirs are usually made a number.
So it takes a lot of time and money to purchase an instrument, practice an instrument to the level in which these semi-professional professional orchestras expect you to be able to play. And so it's not like just any adult can pick up a violin and practice for a few weeks, a few months, a year, and then try and audition for like a real orchestra. There's not really a lot of opportunities for that, but everyone has a voice. And so choir directors, typically, from my background and experience, believe, oh, if you have a voice, you can sing, and we'll teach you what we need you to know in so many ways. Like there's just at least more opportunities for kind of a beginner amateur singer to find their place in a church choir, a community choir. There's, yeah, I think there's just different, I don't want to say levels, but that's really kind of how it's broken down in this hierarchy of church choir, community choirs being more open to anyone. And then, you know, as you get into the higher collegiate choirs, there's more auditioning. And then, of course, there's semi-professional and professional ensembles where you really need to be able to, you know, audiate or hear music in your head and be able to read music at a very proficient level for those types of ensembles. So I'll just say that kind of as background. Orchestra versus choir, I feel like there's always this sort of difference in how much time and energy is required prior to participation.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, Kiki. Yeah, so all of that to say, when I was at USC and I went through the audition process, there were a couple of moments during the audition process, and this is really interesting to reflect upon now because this directly ties into your question that you asked about my experience in the darkness. I was very, like I mentioned, I had worked tirelessly to develop the skills that I had developed at that point in my life. I'd worked
Your entire
really,
adult life.
yeah, I'd worked really, really hard, and that was my life, you know. And this is something, an interesting thing about being a musician, as opposed to being like maybe someone who chooses their major in college and gets a job in that. Like I've been a musician my whole life, so it's like this is who I am, and it's personal, and there's a lot to it.
Vulnerable.
Vulnerable, yes, yes. So there were a number of moments in the audition process where I was not shy about being outspoken about things in front of faculty, and the head of one of the faculty who had significant pull at the school and in the department, um, he didn't like that. He didn't like that. He took that as arrogance, and I was waitlisted. I wasn't accepted initially at USC. I was waitlisted, and
You know, I think I just want to take a moment too to say, somebody who's gone through this audition process, I feel in some environments the expectation is for you to be outspoken, and the expectation is for you to point out just what you're observing, and be really like kind of go in there, be like have people remember you, you know, really show them that you are knowledgeable of the craft. And so I will say, like, in defense of at least like that general kind of way of being that you have described of you going into it, I mean, that's kind of how I feel like I was trained, was, you know, to go into spaces and be memorable and to be heard, and to kind of be aggressive in a lot of ways anyway. Like you've described it as arrogance, but I think there was some, I always kind of rejected that, but this aggressiveness that I felt within our field in general of like proving yourself and like, oh, do you know what composer that is and who their contemporaries were? And like, it was just in our master's program and in desiring to be in a doctoral program, you're quizzed on all this stuff so many times over that
yes.
I feel like that relationship between the student and the teacher becomes really like, there's a little bit of animosity that is like desired because there's like that drive to show what you've learned, which is also like a weird fucked up way for teachers to get their accolades for themselves. Like, ooh, look what I did. Like, I
Yeah.
taught them that, you know,
Yeah.
and they get their ego stroked from that, you know? So that's how I've kind of started to narrate a little bit more of my experience, even though it was such a positive experience. And I'm so glad I did it. There's a lot of my education where I feel like I was pushed into what maybe some folks would describe as like toxic masculinity. Because our craft of choral conducting is historically white men.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like how dialogue and conversation was when I was in school, was like really aggressive and assertive.
So many truths, Kiki. So many truths. The biggest, this is this this ties in directly with what you just said. The biggest moment that got me in trouble, I was sitting in on a conducting class. And keep in mind, I'm a current master's student. I'm finishing up my master's degree. And I was watching someone conduct, happened to be a master's student at USC. So I'm like, oh shit, they're at USC. They're going to be super good. And this person and they were conducting a piece that I did on my recital that you sang in. We were doing the Bruckner, they were the Bruckner Os Justi. And I love that. I love that piece. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And this guy got up there and he didn't know the music and he didn't look like he really cared and like wasn't engaged. And I was so triggered by that. I was so triggered by that because I traveled across the country to go to this school. I paid money to come to this audition. There's a huge amount of pressure for me to get into this prestigious school, and I'm sitting in on your conducting class watching one of your students who's supposed to be the same level as me. I know this thing front and back. I've memorized this thing. I know all the parts. I've conducted this thing. I've spent hours and hours practicing this. Y'all are starting to see like this is Kiki knows this, Nathan. Kiki knows.
I know him so well, and I loved him so much.
so I see this guy up there, and then when he gets done, they always, they ask for feedback and comments, and people in the class do that, and I raise my hand, and they called on me, and this is exactly what I said. I said, it looks like you don't know the music at all. And that's what I said. And because I was really triggered. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, I've worked so hard to get here, and now I'm watching this happen. Like, what the fuck? So it's like, I was upset. And so I get waitlisted. And then I get a phone call from one of the professors at USC, and they brought up these moments, and they were like, word for word, he's like, I wanted to call to make sure I'm not taking an asshole into my program. And that shattered me. It shattered me because like I had worked so hard to get to this point, and I sacrificed a lot of things, and this was my dream to go to this school. This was the school that I wanted to go to, and
I'm watching this all unfold in real time. I remember when you went to the audition. I remember when you came back from the audition. I remember when you got that phone call. I remember when you told us about the phone call. So I just also want everyone to know, like, I'm hearing this story again, and like I was there witnessing all of this at the same time. Not that I was, experiencing all of these same emotions as you, but as a colleague, as a like fellow student, I was witnessing all of this unfold in real time.
And to bring it back to what you were talking about in terms of the excellence that's required, I knew the music. I did what I was supposed to do. And then I called it out. I called out the person for not knowing it. I told the truth. I told the truth.
USC is supposed to be like the best school. It's like there's just like all of this push for us to basically compete with one another in that way, right? Like you were really encouraged to have that sort of attitude and behavior towards the work that you were being trained in and, you know, desiring to be entered into this school. And so I just want to also give that perspective for folks who may not be familiar with this culture. It's a very cutthroat culture. Like it sounds like really fun, like choral music, we're all singing together. But when you get into these like more niche aspects of it and communities, it can be pretty brutal.
And they disguise it as we're all love, we're the choral community, we're always smiling, we're singing with each other. And then behind closed doors, it's a different story.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It really is.
so that phone call destroyed me. But at the end of the call, he's like, and like I apologize profusely, and I'm like, I will change. Like I was, and then he said, I'm not saying no to you. I wanted to talk to you, and I wanted to say these things to you. And if you want to be a part of the program, call me tomorrow and tell me. Sit on it tonight. Call me tomorrow and tell me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I did. I sat on it, um, and I called him and I told him I wanted to go. But that set the tone for my entire experience at USC. My
Mm-hmm.
entire experience. My head, like I said at the beginning, I had my tail. I felt like I was walking with my tail between my legs. Felt like I had to. I couldn't. I couldn't. I had to say the right things all the time. I
Mm-hmm.
felt I had to keep my head down and be a yes person.
Mm-hmm.
And from someone who's been a people pleaser their whole life and then finally took chances at something they've been working their whole life and dedicated their life to. They finally took chances to be courageous and speak out about stuff. And then for that to happen, that fucked me up. That fucked me up. Um, so then I went through USC. I kept my head down. I did what I was told. I ended up being the TA for the person that had the phone call with me, and that was a whole experience. They when I told them things I did not even in a malicious way. When I was honest about things with them, they waved my TA in front of me and told me that if I didn't choose to be their TA again, they wouldn't give me another TA. And this was in his office, just me and him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Basically like dangling your future in front of you.
yeah, and this person
And
is
that power dynamic that exists with advisors, mentors in the graduate level is so tedious and like so fragile, because you do know as the student, like this advisor relationship can make or break me, even if, you know, when it comes down to letters of recommendation and when it comes down to how they're going to treat you during your dissertation process, other professors that could be on a committee that's advising you, you know, it's it can be a very yeah, I'll just say tedious way of relating to one another, because you are constantly trying to please these superiors that can make or break your future if you decide to take that degree and move forward with it in a traditional path.
right, exactly. And this person not only was the head of the department at the school, but this person is an internationally known figure in our field. So he knows everything. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like I was sitting and I was just sitting there. I remember sitting there in his office. I remember looking him in the eyes and having him tell me those things that he told me, and I was just like, I have no control. I
Mm-hmm.
feel powerless right now in this situation. And so that was a big moment. That was a big moment. And then I then had another conversation with him and spoke more of my truth. And then things were bad for a while. And then we kind of made up, I guess. But that was,
I mean,
that was
ultimately that led you to eventually, right, dropping out of the program.
yeah, yeah. I and I'm not the first one who's had an experience like that at the program that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when it came to my third year, bringing it back to the question, when it came to my third year of 2019, 2020, I was I was ready. I was really burned out. I was burned out of school. I was burned out of academia. I was burned out of the choral scene. I was burned out of music. I didn't want to play music. I didn't want to sing. I didn't want to listen to music. And music was the thing that I dedicated my whole life to. You know, it's my gift. It's who I am. It's how I I'm a sound alchemist. That's how I share my soul. You know, it's how I raise it's how I raise my vibration and help other people raise theirs. You know, that's like
Mm-hmm.
my soul contract. You know, so
Yeah.
it's more than just it was more than just a degree, and it was more than
Yeah.
just it was my whole life. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so I chose to drop out, and the pandemic hit, and it was a great time to take a leave of absence. I was just like, I'm just taking a leave. I'm pretty much done, but I'm going to take a leave, try to navigate this pandemic that we have going on, and see what happens. And it was then that I took a break. I wanted so badly to work a 9 to 5. After all of the school that I did, I got a job at a sushi restaurant. I worked at a hand roll restaurant. I was a server and a host for like 9 months. Made some money because I had to, because music was shut down and I had just left my doctorate degree, which I was getting paid to do. So I was like, I have no income now. So I chose to do all that to support myself, and slowly started coming back to music by playing piano and playing guitar and playing music that I loved. Um, a lot of non-classical music, because I didn't originally grow up loving classical music. That was something that I learned
Mm-hmm.
when I went to school.
Yes. Yes. And that's something that we really, again, share similar paths on. Um, I didn't touch classical music until I had to when I, was studying or in the middle school, high school choir and had to do solo and ensemble. At the time I was listening to Alicia Keys, I was listening to Etta James and all of these Motown artists um and then you have to go into solo and ensemble and they give you Last from the Low Country or if anyone knows what that is. I don't know. They give you these songs and I figured out, oh, okay, well, if this is like the game I have to play to be able to sing, I'll play that game, I guess. This is just what you have to do if you're gonna study music. Um, but yeah, I mean, I feel like what I really love about your story and what I'm connecting to right now is like when we go so far into something really with this like people pleasing behavior and you mentioned like there was a lot of triggers for you within like the program itself, and so like when we aren't maybe aware of those triggers, like I think you probably are using the trigger now, understanding using 2020 looking back, that um this people pleasing behavior really led you down a path to try and make this idea or concept of what it meant to be a successful musician your dream, when ultimately like that led you down a path to despising music and not wanting it in your life anymore. and how this like return to music in the meantime has been such a reclamation of your personal medicine for yourself and the world, and how you've rediscovered the role of music in your life, and what it can do, on a bigger scale than just like, I'm going to read some notes and regurgitate it. But literally, as you said, you're a sound alchemist, that you are able to raise your soul's vibration by playing music, and that you can connect to the divine through music, that you can share that divinity with others through your music making, but that it really took you to this dark night of the soul, if folks are familiar with that term, to experience that, to be at the bottom of the bottom, for you to like rise up into who you are today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. And I think I'm not, I don't regret my path. I'm not upset about it. I don't, I've forgiven myself and others. And that was a chapter of my life,
Mm-hmm.
chapter of my life that, that showed me so many lessons and
Mm-hmm.
taught me so much about myself and taught me so much about other people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm
So
grateful.
where are you today, with your relationship to choral music, um, classical music? As you've mentioned, you've returned more to your original loves of probably leaning more into the pop music styles. But like, where are you at currently with your relationship to all of the training that you've done in your life?
I'm in a very, I'm in a healed place. I'm in a healed place. And I know that because I've been able to return to music that at one point, because of certain situations in my life, I didn't want to listen to at all. And music that reminded me of pain. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you know what's interesting is that it was never the music's fault necessarily. It was just the way that it was wielded. It was the way that it was taught. It was the way that it was understood. The music is the music. And I'm at a place now where I enjoy listening to choral music. You know, I enjoy listening to symphonic music. I enjoy listening to classical piano. I I enjoy the music again. But I will say I don't have the fervor that I had for it that I used to have. I think it has a rebalanced place in my life. And frankly, it's it's a place, I think it's in the place where it was always meant to be. I think when I started my undergrad and started the college journey, I'm curious if you relate to this. Classical music had uh, classical music had an over prioritized place because of the over prioritization in the academic system. So no, I'm it's balanced. It's balanced. It's more balanced. I conduct a choir at the Unitarian Church, at the First Unitarian Church of Los Angeles. We do a lot of different music. We do some Western classical music. We were doing some Handel last week, and I loved it, and the people loved it,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm able to come back to it from a completely different, deeper sense of understanding, and I'm grateful for that. How about you?
I am in a similar place of feeling more healed in my relationship to choral music. I think really in my doctorate, I was just in a place where I wanted to point out everything that was wrong with choral music, the culture of choral music, the way that we teach vocal choral music. Um, because it emerged out of a uh, patriarchal, colonial culture, a lot of that exists in what we do. Like there's a lot of gender binary terms that we utilize. There's a lot of connections with the church that have caused, some like blurred lines of what I think is appropriate for school and what is not. And, I really kind of just wanted to say, this stuff is really fucked up. Why are we even doing this? And that was my original like feeling when I started to decolonize. It was like a very aggressive, I talk about activism now as like just being activated. And that's why like sometimes I lean away from using the word activism because I actually really want to be regulated when I'm talking about this stuff. And so when I was decolonizing at first, I was very activated because I wasn't connected to my body. I wasn't connected to my story. I was just, again, using my brain to point out what was right and what was wrong. I was so trained to use my intellect um, to analyze and observe and make really critical comments about what I was experiencing, whether that was like a sonic
Mm,
thing I was listening to, or be critical about a reading that I was doing, or it was just like all about critical thinking and critiquing. And
yeah.
so that was really how I came at it first. And again, I'm grateful for my journey, grateful for what I learned in that process. But in the last 3 years, have really gotten to a point where it's like I'm exhausted of being critical and also recognizing that not everything was 100% bad or negative or ill intentioned. That like the reason why I stayed on the path as long as I did was because there was so much beauty in it. There was so much love in it. There was so
Mhm.
much uh yeah, I really think all of the singing that I did throughout my education was what kept me at a fairly regulated place. It allowed me to connect with spirit, even though I wasn't acknowledging it in that way or with that language. Singing that much kept my body in a place of like a fairly decent, like cleared vessel where like I was using my intuition a lot. At that time, I just, again, I wasn't very intentional around using it. So I
Mhm.
think, music has always been a therapy for me. It has always helped me connect deeper to my emotions, my body, to community. And so in the last 3 years, I've really been able to balance out these narratives that I had of like choral music is awful and terrible and we should never do that thing again, to this thing where I'm like, no, there's so much beauty in it. And there's so much richness in the concept of singing in community that I'm really wanting to figure out how can I honor both sides of myself in the ways that I've experienced singing now. And I'm currently an adjunct professor at Lincoln Land Community College in Springfield, Illinois, where I am teaching voice and I'm teaching classical arias and art songs. And it's so funny to me when I'm like taking a step back and watching myself teach these lessons. And I'm like teaching people about IPA, which is the International Phonetic Alphabet, which helps you like decode uh, romantic languages like French and Italian and German. And I'm like able to just spit this stuff out like it is another language that is in my body. Like I'm not fluent in any other language, but I know IPA so well and I can do diction in these, art songs and arias like it's nothing. Like I've just worked so hard that it's so part of me. And for a long time, I was really ashamed of that. And now I'm just starting to be a little bit more joyful about it and like caring for myself that like, yeah, I worked really fucking hard for a long time to learn this stuff. I'm not going to keep shaming myself for knowing it and being able to utilize it to support other people's dreams that maybe I don't want to be an opera singer, but my student does. And so I can use this knowledge to support their dreams and their goals. And there's nothing wrong with that either. So I am definitely in a place where I'm grateful that the knowledge that I've worked so hard to obtain is paying my bills, is supporting me and my family at this time. And I don't see myself necessarily utilizing it forever, but it's really not a terrible gift to have. And yeah, so just like really honoring the education that I spent so many years getting, and the incredible people like you that were on that path as I was figuring it all out. And yes, it has led me to who I am today. So yeah, I'm definitely in a more balanced place. And I would love to dig into this conversation a little bit more about, you know, how our um, how our relationship to Western European classical music has shifted in the last few years, because I think there's still a lot more juiciness to this conversation. So I'm thinking that we will probably pick this up during our next stream, probably next month. But I'm so grateful that we get a chance to connect here and share our stories through Soft Power TV. And if y'all are interested in us, you know, talking about other topics, talking about sound, frequency, vibrations, and the power and the therapy and the healing that can be done with this energy, let us know. Put it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. That's where we can really nerd out and get get deep and nerdy about it. So yeah, Nathan, is there any final thoughts that you have before we close out today?
I just want to say thank you, and then and just one last response to what you were just sharing at the very end. That's such a beautiful recalibration that
Mm.
I'm.
Oh, I love that word.
It's such a. I'm just so grateful to be a part of, to be a witness in your journey, and
Mm.
it's truly it's an incredible thing to witness. I love you so much.
I love you too. And if y'all are watching or tuning in for the replay, if you want more of this, please join us in the Soft Power Choir.
Yes.
We have had 4 meetings calls already, and we'll be meeting again on the first and third Mondays of each month. So head to our IG page where you can sign up through our form, and you'll get the emails with those Zoom links. So we'd love to have you. We are a budding but growing community with, I think, over 70 members at this point. There's no requirement to join every single week. Just join as you are when you can, and just be you. Your soul's unique frequency is meant to be heard, and we invite you to join our community. All right. I didn't tap us in to the soft power frequency, but I'll tap us on out. Okay. All right. See you later, y'all.